I wish we didn't have to go through them. I wish we could just be like, yeah, I know what I want, and I don't have to like have this huge, horrible experience to be reminded of it.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. If you haven't already, go check out the Hip Habits Workbook. It is 6 months of weekly habits to help your life overall. It includes everything from financial goals to goals surrounding physical health and mindfulness. Now let me introduce you to today's guest. You are going to be hearing from Stefanie Grassley. She and her husband are the owners of Castello di Ristanchi. It's a beautiful castle in Italy. And that was the dream. They bought this beautiful castle and they were holding events, workshops, weddings. And within the first year of that ownership, Stefanie was involved in a terrible accident with the water heater. She suffered severe burns. She was caught on fire. She, as an English speaker, had to go into an Italian hospital where she was for months. We're going to talk about all of that, where she is now, 3 years after that incident, and what she has learned and the process of healing, and so much in this episode. I think you are going to take a lot from Stefanie's perspective and learning from her. I also want to mention before we hop into the episode, we didn't talk about this in the podcast, but the pandemic has been hard for all venue owners, as you can guess. So if you want, just go over to show notes. You'll find the link to their beautiful castle, and there you can learn about what they are selling. They've had to regroup, switch gears a little bit, and they have some incredible products there. You can buy them. She'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the episode as well. Now let's get to it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Stefanie. I'm so excited to chat with you.
I'm excited too. Thank you.
So you have been through such an excruciating thing. You've had a very tough story, but let's start when you were living the dream. You just bought this castle. I was interested on your Instagram, on the castle's Instagram. It says living our dream and nightmare. Before the nightmare occurred, tell me about that dream.
Well, I mean, the nightmare, it kind of comes along with the dream in a way, just because you have a dream and in the back of your mind, you still know like it's going to be hard, right? And it's like, okay, well, if I go for this thing that I really want, am I prepared for what could happen? Which, things could be really hard. It couldn't work out, or we could lose everything, or, it's like, so I think Rasmus, my husband, and I, we made an unfortunate decision or prediction that the first 3 years would be really hard for us. And we called that out to the universe, I think, because we're like, okay, you know what? The first 3 years are just going to be so hard and we're going to get through it. And then after that, it's going to be smooth sailing. And wow, we really fulfilled that promise of 3 really hard years that were harder than anyone could have ever expected. But I will say about the dream, it was, before all the crazy stuff happened, it was really magical and perfect. And it's just exactly what I wanted for my life and for my kids. We were living in a tiny apartment in Copenhagen, and it was actually a huge apartment, but we were Airbnb-ing all the other rooms and just living as a family of 4 in a tiny room, just saving up everything we could. And then we came to the castle, and it was just, we have so much space and the kids can just be outside all the time, because Copenhagen weather versus Italy weather is very different. So it was just really beautiful, and it felt like being on vacation all the time. We have a pool and just going to eat Italian food, and the magic just kind of wears off with everything when reality hits and the hard stuff comes.
Yeah. You called out that 3 years, and has it been about 3 years now, or we're in the beginning of
Mhm.
that 3rd year? Are you out of the hard stuff, do you think?
I have to think so, or else I can't keep going. Yeah, we had a celebration at the 3-year mark. It was just a couple of months ago. We're like, "Okay, that was it. We did it." And now we are just gonna, things are gonna come easy and all that junk is over.
Mhm.
And, like, clearly we're still in, like, a hard spot because we haven't had any events in 2020, and now 2021 events are starting to cancel or wanna postpone for another year, and it's like, but you have to kind of keep the faith or otherwise, like, how can you do anything, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Take me to the night you smell gas.
Okay, and just to preface this, I'm gonna try and kind of be disconnected about it when I talk
Mhm.
about it, otherwise, I'll just,
It's
like
just too much. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, so things were going well, we had, like, a big event, and I was in the kitchen cooking, and then someone was like, "Oh, I smell gas, like, down the hill." I'm like, "Well, that's not my problem," like, I I'm just trying to make dinner for 50 people. Like, can't someone else deal with this? But I figured, okay, I'm the owner. I need to like figure this out. So I left and went down to check it. It's like not at the castle, but like down the hill a bit.
Mhm.
And I go in this room with like a million old controls. Like the castle itself is over 1,000 years old.
Wow.
And so all these gas panels are not that old, obviously, but still old. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I smell the gas, but everything looks like it's in the right place. So I don't know what to do. I'm going to go ask Rasmus. So I shut the door, and then, like 5 steps away from the door, that room exploded. And I was just like thrown in an action movie like style explosion. And yeah, I was on fire, and I was just laying on the ground, and you know, people heard the explosion, and like someone came and dumped water on me and got me off like out of fire. And like looking at kind of the space where it all happened, which is probably not good. And then yeah, I really thought I was at first, I just thought I was dead, like, or very close to dying, like,
Mhm.
uh, a person can't survive this, like, and everything just hurt and felt tight and hot, like, I couldn't open my eyes or I could barely move my mouth, and, like, I could tell the skin was, like, gone
Oh my
from my
gosh.
hands and arms. Um There's a few, like, lucky things about it, like, that day I had shorts on, and last minute I changed into long pants, and that saved my legs, and, when the explosion happened, I instinctively, like, just covered my face, and that also saved my face. I obviously had a ton of burns on my face and had to get skin grafts there, but, like, it didn't melt off like it could have.
Mhm.
So then I went to the cold shower and stood there, and I didn't really like, what else can you do? Like, once I figured out, okay, I'm not dead, I can actually stand up. This is crazy because I just felt like very shriveled. Like, if you picture like a mummy when you open like all the wrapping and stuff, it just like I felt like this dead brown mummy. So it was just like going to deteriorate,
Mhm.
like, but, I didn't, so, yeah, I got up and I started walking to the shower and just stood in the cold shower and was like, "Okay, actually, I'm totally fine." Then my brain went
Really? Oh my
completely
gosh.
the other way and was like, well, I'll just wait for the doctor. Like, I just couldn't even see. I was clearly, like, not well, but my brain for some reason was like, "Okay, well, I'll be back, like, for dinner to make dinner," and just,
Mhm. Wow. I
planning stuff.
in an emergency situation, in the situations that I've been in, the brain can work so fast and think about 1,000 thoughts at once. When you were in that explosion and you were thinking, "Okay, I'm dying, I'm dead." Was there a lot more going on in the brain? Did you have a lot of thoughts about that? Did they rattle off thoughts or?
My thought was, "Why God?" I said, "Why God? Why God? Why God?" in my head like 1,000 times before I, like, stood up and realized, okay, I didn't die. It's
Mhm.
just like I didn't understand because, things were going well, but I think after that, then I just started thinking about how I was so happy that my kids weren't with me
Mhm.
because I had a let's see, was he even I had 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time, and, they're like, uh, hippie garden babies, they're outdoors, they don't wear clothes or shoes very often, so I could just imagine, like, I always had my 1-year-old on my hip and my 2-year or 3-year-old by his side, and it's like so I think I was just like, "Okay, it wasn't them," because as hard as my situation was, that's one thing that kind of kept me grateful, was just that it wasn't them.
Mhm. Mhm. It's amazing to me that the brain can simultaneously say, "Why, God? Why?" and then be like, "I'm so glad my kids aren't here." That's amazing. It's just the brain is just this incredible thing. So you go to this Italian hospital. I know that it was absolutely horrible. There was the language issue and all of the yelling, in Italian. Tell me a little bit about the hardest part of being there.
Oh, man. Well, they put me in a coma, like, in the ambulance. I don't remember, like, anything after the ambulance for a while. Um, the hardest thing, though, was the morphine visions
Mm,
because it was I didn't know what was real. It was so bizarre. And I have those dreams. They're actual memories. Like, when I look back at them, I it's so real. And to me, in that moment in the hospital, they were extremely real. And I was so confused because people were telling me, like, "No, no, your husband is not cheating on you. He's here with flowers." And I'm like, "Get out. I hate you." And I told my friend on the phone that I was getting a divorce, and, he was being crazy, because in my morphine visions, he was cheating on me with, like, multiple nurses in my room, like, just they were all just like, "Hey, we're
and you
doing this
thought
in
you were
front of
actually
you."
seeing this, right? Like, you thought you were witnessing this happen in the room.
100%. Like, it was so real. I remember every tiny detail. Like, when you have a dream, you wake up and you think about it, and then, like, if you don't write it down or whatever, it's gone. But these are just real memories. So, yeah, I thought my husband was just, like, the worst person on the planet, and I thought that people were trying to kill me and sell my organs, and then I thought that my kids were outside screaming for me in the rain, and that all they had to eat was, like, a giant thing of cheesy poofs, like, I'm like, "Why is no one taking care of them? What is happening?" And I would tell the nurses, like, "My kids are outside, like, they wanna see me, like, you have to let them in," and they're like, "I'm sorry, but they're not outside. You don't even have a window." I didn't have a window, but I could, like, see them outside. I was just watching, like, their silhouettes be in pain. So and then when I kind of started to come out of the morphine fog, I realized that the ambulance sounds were what I thought were my children's cries.
Oh my
And being in a
gosh.
hospital, there's a lot of ambulance sounds all the time. So I'm like, okay, okay. So some things started to like click, but man, there's just so many false memories that are really rough. And then there was the reality of it, right? Where the it's just a totally different environment. I mean, I was completely isolated. I could have only one visitor at a time and for short periods of time. And yeah, the doctors and nurses didn't speak English. A few of them did, but they weren't always there or they went on vacation. And then I was alone. And I just felt like nobody really cared about me. And obviously, there are a few that I couldn't have made it through without. But for the most part, it's just such a weird place where if a patient is in ICU and the doctors and nurses are just yelling all throughout the night and laughing and playing a game in my doorway with it open. And I'm like, why? And yeah, the machines were beeping constantly. I just didn't get any sleep. The food was terrible. And I wasn't healing. I was in the hospital for about 4 months and just not healing. And it was absolute torture.
How did you get through that?
Um, so my mom and dad came over from the US. And it's also like, as bad as it was, there's always things like, well, thank God it wasn't during Corona time because I could not have had any visitors and I would not have made it.
Mm,
I would not have, like, wanted to fight, you know? I
mhm.
couldn't have done it alone. So, yeah, th they came and my mom just kept changing her ticket and staying until I was able to go home. So, yeah, and Rasmus would come visit, and they would bring my kids. I couldn't see my kids at all in person, but there was, like, a window to an inside area. It was across the room, like, from my bed, and my mom and my mother-in-law and my husband, like, hold up my kids,
Mhm.
and they're just like, "What is happening?" Obviously, I'm completely bandaged up. I just disappeared one day, you know?
Mhm.
Mm.
What was your biggest fear while you were in there? Your biggest concern?
Mhm. It was my kids just
Mhm.
missing, you know, how fast things go at those ages, and that was definitely a big one where I thought, well, because people were saying, "Oh, you have to, Instagram when you meet your kids again. It's gonna be this amazing, uplifting moment," and it I knew that it wasn't gonna be like that because I looked completely different
Mhm.
and I acted completely different. I could still, like, barely speak, and I couldn't even walk, you know? So I had my husband like carried me into the bed when I got home, and I had my kids come in one at a time, but they didn't come close to me. They were just like across the room, and it took quite a while, and that really, really hurts because before that, obviously, like I was their main person,
Mhm.
like they wanted me for everything, and now that's back to normal, like, it didn't take that long, but it's still a really painful thing. My other
Mhm.
concern in the hospital, though, was that I wouldn't be able to do anything. I wouldn't be like who I was before, which, like, when my physical therapist was, "Oh, what sports did you do before this?" And I just started crying because I thought that was a really unfair question to
Mhm.
ask me, like, to think about how yeah, I was doing yoga every day and going running and swimming and biking in the mountains in the by the castle, and I was in really good shape, and then suddenly I couldn't even move a finger,
Mhm.
and I I mean, it was just so painful to have to go. I couldn't even open my mouth. I had to just stretch everything and gain muscles. My workout was just like touching my thumb to my fingers or
Right.
trying to lift my leg a few times. So,
You mentioned you were worried about not being able to be that person you were before. How do you think about that now? Are you that person you were before? How have you been changed?
that question is a big one. Uh, for the most part, I am back to myself physically. Um, I mean, besides the scars, obviously, but I can do things. I can pick up my kid and hug them, and I can go for a run if I wanted to. But and then mentally, like I was hoping for some huge change. And it's hard to recognize a huge change in yourself, I
Mhm.
think is part of the issue, but I was thinking like, "Okay, now I've had this life-altering experience and near-death experience, and now I know what's important, and I'm gonna, like, change my life and the world. Um, I'm here for a reason." But then, like, it's so easy to fall back into, like, the regular stresses of everyday life. And when I was in the hospital, all I wanted was to go outside with my kids. That's that's the only thing that was important to me then. And now it's like, okay, I have that and that's easy to do, but it's not the most important thing to me anymore. So I always have to remind myself like, okay, what do you really want your life to be like and what are those important things? But like I said, I didn't have a window and at one point there was like some boxes in the way and my mom went and moved like so I could see a sliver of a tree when she like
Mhm.
moved all this stuff and moved and I just sobbed and sobbed because nature is really important
Yeah.
and I was just stuck in that sterile room for months, and now I am really grateful to be able to be in nature whenever I want, and I do feel like I take advantage of it and appreciate the small things a lot more. It's
Mhm.
been about 2 years since my accident, and I'm still, like, grateful every time I use the toilet. Just like,
Mhm.
I'm so happy that my legs can walk me to this toilet and sit me down and stand me up all by myself.
Mhm.
That's huge.
I think the brain, again, is just such a weird thing, the human brain, because we know that once we have an experience where something becomes so important to us, and then it's so easy to fall back into our regular old patterns. I've done that 1,000 times. Like I live in Oregon where the smoke gets really, really thick in the summers because of the wildfire season. And then we're like,
Mhm.
oh, we miss the fresh air. The fresh air comes back and we're thankful for it for, a month, maybe 2 months. And then we're like, fresh air is normal. We forget what a blessing it is to be able to breathe fresh air. The whole thing is a practice. We just had to bring ourselves back to, the gratitude and the perspective over and over and over again. What day did your accident happen?
October 1st, 2018.
So you don't have to respond to this if you don't want. I went way back onto your Facebook, way, way, way back in the posts. Um, and the last
Okay.
post that you posted before this happened was in September. And it seemed like it was about a brain injury that you had, and you wrote about this brain injury. And the last thing you wrote was, I am a big believer in the terrible times and I thank them. Everything awful in my life has brought me to the very best things. What do you think about that now?
I know when I was in the hospital, one of my best friends from childhood, like, sent me that in an email because they set up an email for me and, like, people sent letters and my parents would read them to me. And I was like, "Stop. I don't wanna hear that. I'm not ready
Right?
for that." Um, oh, man, I'm not there yet on this one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it could happen. Like, I can see it happening in the future. But before that, I had some things happen to me that were terrible, but nothing compared to an accident like this. And it all brought like these new opportunities and, you know, new people and new way of life, or like it brought me to my husband, and the brain injury like ended up bringing us to move forward with the castle and to decide what we really want in life. So I think in that way, yeah, I still believe in those things, but I wish we didn't have to go through them.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we could just be like, yeah, I know what I want, and I don't have to like have this huge horrible experience to be reminded of it.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, some of us do.
Mm-hmm. The last question I want to ask you is, I ask everybody, the podcast is about finding joy in the good, the bad, and the in-between. What is your tip to doing that? Finding joy when things aren't great?
Um, One of my mottos is just like make the decision and then make it the right one.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so easy to second guess yourself and say, oh well, things would have been better if we didn't do this, or we didn't uh yeah, because life is all about making the big decisions to get you somewhere that you want to be. So that's something that I think I remind myself of. Like, I made the decision, and when I was and it was in a good place, and the decision could lead you to a really bad place. But you still have to believe in yourself and the decision. That's why you made it, even through the bad times. And remember why you made the decision in the first place, I think is what helps me, and just go back to that philosophy that brought you there in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that is something is so great to live by. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I know you guys are shifting to selling different kinds of goods. I saw the hemp beer available on the website. I'm sure there's other things. Can we buy those in America?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I don't know if you know how Italy is, but everything just takes so much longer than the US. But we've been trying to like get the shipping set up for months or years, maybe. And I think we finally have it. I got the email
Okay.
today, and so we'll set that up very soon. And that's at ristonki.com if you would
And
link it.
I'll put it all in the show notes so it's easily findable, if that's a word. But thank you so much for sharing your story and going back to the stuff that's not easy to talk to share what you've been through and how you've come through that.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, giving me some free therapy.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Stefanie. You can find all of her information, like I said, in show notes. Go ahead and check that out. And I want to thank you for being here on Happiness in Progress.